We're live. Molana Sajid, you want to kick off?
Yeah, Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Jazakallah for joining us, guys. And today, mashallah, we welcome Aklaq Rauf, and I don't think he needs any introduction in the local community. I worked with Aklaq for many years. He's very well respected in our community. He was the chair of governors at Girlington Primary School. He's working at the community centre. He's also involved with the council and many projects, inshallah, which we'll hear today, inshallah, from Aklaq himself. About his work and his efforts, and about dementia, and about raising awareness about dementia in our community. So inshallah we'll talk about all these things today, and also about the elderly. The last few days we've been talking about the youth and the problems that face the youth. So today we thought we'll talk about our elders in our community. And yesterday, mashallah, Dr. Waqas, he mentioned a dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Rabbi irhamhuma kama rabbayani saghira, that may Allah have mercy upon them just like they had mercy upon us when we were young. So the thing is, it's valuing our elders, our parents, our grandparents, and alhamdulillah, we live in society and mahols and environments where in our house we'll have an elder, we'll have our parents, we might even have our grandparents there. Or if they're not even in our house, the thing is, we live in an environment where, within our community, we have a lot of elders. In the masjid, a lot of elders do come. So it's how do we respect them? How do we look after them? How do we take care of them? Remember, one day, a time is going to come, we're going to become old. And we want somebody to be there for us and to take care of us. And the hadith comes to mind where, especially it's the month of Ramadan, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he ascended the mimbar and he said Ameen. And then again the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ascended the mimbar and he said Ameen. And the third step, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam ascended the mimbar, he said Ameen. And Sahabas were surprised that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was doing such an action which he's never done before. And they asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, O Prophet of Allah, you said Ameen thrice, 3 times. What was that for? And so the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam replied that Jibreel alayhi salam came to me and he said 3 curses, 3 lanat upon people, and upon all 3 lanats, all 3 du'as I said Ameen. So he said the first is that person who finds the month of Ramadan and is not forgiven. Upon that I said Ameen. So just imagine Jibreel have made a bad dua, a lanat, a dua of destruction for that person who finds the month of Ramadan who is not forgiven. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saying Ameen. So how severe that must be. Second is that person that he has parents or one of them and they've reached old age, but because failing to serve them, he doesn't enter Jannat. And upon that, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said Ameen. The third person is that person when the name Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam Muhammad is mentioned, that they don't send durud upon him Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Upon that, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said Ameen. So these 3 category of people are cursed because for the various reasons. So one of them, like we said, is those people that have elders, but they fail to serve them, look after them, and because of that, they don't gain Jannat. So what we know is our elders, they are our Jannat, they are our paradise. We've got to take care of them, we've got to look after them. And remember, care means many things. Care doesn't just mean that we press their feet or anything. It can mean many things, and I've learned that, and I've talked in our previous podcast, is that like now my mom, she suffered from stroke, and we realized we had to adjust everything according to her needs, and sometimes her needs might not be in our home. You understand? And it might be in a care home or something. So something, sometimes not all the houses are practical for a patient that's very ill. So you realize that, wait a minute, before when we used to sometimes say how can you send somebody to some place, but you realize, wait a minute, we need to give the best care to our elders, whatever it may be, however it may be. So you've got to adjust and you've got to look after them, you've got to take care of them. And remember, main thing, gain their du'as. When they say dua, Allah accepts the dua of the elders, just like He accepts the dua of the youngsters. So we should gain their dua. So whenever we help them, whenever we open the door for them, whenever we talk to them, same time we should get their duas from them. And that's what our elders used to always do. And kisi ne dua lag jaye to phir our dunya and akhirat is made. So the big thing is we are whatever goes around comes around. Today we take care of our elders. Inshallah, tomorrow our children, our youngsters will take care of us. So elderly care is very important. We need to value them. I used to have a friend in the care home, Muhammad Yusuf, and I've said this story many a time. One day I was here in Girlington, Britannia Care Home, and walking back from namaz, and Muhammad Yusuf, he was a white person, and he was a new Muslim, and I didn't know he was a Muslim. And I was walking past, and he said, "Assalamu alaikum," and so I just said, "Wa alaikum assalam." So then he said, "I'm a Muslim." So then I was a bit shocked. So I approached him, and so then start talking to him. Then we had a friendship, and then I used to go see him. And the thing was, when I went to that care home, and then I made a lot of other friends, and the elders that were in that care home, and they would show me their albums and their photographs of, the world wars that they've been through, when they were young and whatever. And you think, wow, mashallah, they used to look beautiful, handsome, whatever. And look at them now, and there's nobody to ask about them. There's nobody to care about them, or no family member there to support them. But do you understand? So you realize that these are elders, these are humans as well. So we've got to do qadr of them. We've got to value them. We've got to look after them. We've got to take care of them, and they're valuable members of our community. And so definitely, and I think today is a good topic about the elderly, how we should respect them, how we should do their guzr. Their guzr means that we should hug them as well, because then, just like children, they're not easy to look after. When somebody becomes elderly, then sometimes they can be very hard to look after. We've got to be patient with them. And there are a few stories, but inshallah, as we go along, we'll talk about those things. And I think I've mentioned quite a few things. And Babar?
MashaAllah. Dr. Brother Aklaq, I had a question that arose from something that happened yesterday. So after the podcast yesterday, we sat down and we talked about what should we talk about in today. And the topic of dementia was introduced. And what seems like a mistake now, but it's something that it'd be interesting if you could point out to us, is I automatically linked dementia with mental health. And then obviously Dr. Molana Sajid corrected me saying that's not an appropriate link. So if you could just speak a little bit about what's the difference and why mental health and dementia are two separate topics. I think that'd be really interesting, because I feel that it's a common, what seems like a misconception, that mental health and dementia are linked, and it's something that almost could be prevented, dementia. So if you could just help us out to understand what the difference of the two are.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, first and foremost, Jazakallah for asking me to come and join you in this discussion. And I think it's a great initiative in terms of getting conversations started, because people generally tend to think the wider community and masajids don't connect, and that kind of idea of community hub is something that masajids should be very involved. And I think this is a topic particularly of interest, I think, for masajids. Why? Because minority ethnic communities, so non-white British, if you like, so South Asians, African Caribbeans, those of us who have that heritage of migration to this country, you'll find that people hold onto their faith much more than any host country. So it's a bit like if we go to Pakistan, you might see that people there might be much more relaxed about their day-to-day living, whereas if you come here, people are more concerned about making sure our masajid are functioning, our kids have madrasas and so forth. So our elders have a good long association with going to the masjid. So I'm kind of doing a long introduction back into your question, Babar, but I think that there are reasons important to understand before we sort of talk about dementia, that if those elders have had a long association with their masjid, so they've gone regularly, they read their namaz, how they undertake their wudu, all these kind of things. So along comes something that we may not understand. So you ask, what's dementia? The first question that arises from that really is that, actually, what is dementia? As in, like, is there a recognition? Now, across our South Asian culture, so, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, really, if you look at the main 5 languages, there's no word for dementia. So here we have a community that's going to talk about a condition of the brain that we have no word for. Okay, so I associate, something like the word say depression. some years back, nobody would really talk about depression. Now nobody looks for an Urdu, Punjabi, Hinko, Pashto, whatever word for depression. We use the English word depression. And what we've tried to do, I've worked on dementia for about 14 years, is to help normalize this so that we can then start talking about what is dementia. So I'm sorry, it's a bit of a long introduction to that.
No. Perfect.
If we can normalize it, then we can start saying, what is dementia? What is it? So another aspect, just before I kind of talk about dementia, is that in the community, wherever we have something that we don't understand, particularly if we think it might be jinn possession, some kind of jadoo, evil eye, these things, we think that somebody's got something mentally wrong with them. So there is something wrong with their psychology rather than a physical change. And I sometimes ask people in support groups or in training, with elders in roadshows and whatever, I say, look, if I say that so-and-so's had a heart attack, do you believe? And they say, yeah. How do you know? Because you can't see the heart. You take it from somebody, a doctor, a medic that's going to say they've had a heart attack. If I say to you that something physical has changed in the brain, but you can't see the brain, and you're less likely to accept that it's a physical change. And what happens with dementia is that, dementia itself is a word that covers lots of different types of dementia. Okay, so it's just a generic word. And depending on what part of the brain has been affected will depend on what form of dementia somebody's got. And that will depend on what symptoms they have, what behaviors they have. So for example, Alzheimer's disease is well known. That's one of the main forms of dementia. But vascular dementia is another dementia. So, amongst our communities, we have a higher likelihood of having stroke because of our livelihoods, our lifestyles. If you are going to have stroke, so the cut-off of oxygen supply to the brain, if that part of the brain is then affected, brain cells die, then you will have symptoms according to that. So some people, maybe they can't put their sentences together. It might be that Mufti Sahib, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, brother. How are you doing? You okay?
Thanks for joining us, and this will be a great discussion, inshallah. So if one part of the brain is affected that affects your communication, you may not be able to find the words. So it might be that you can't put your sentence together, you can't identify day-to-day things. So, what's a cup, what's a mug? You want to say to somebody, give me my slippers. You can't find the word for slippers. Somebody else might be affected by memory loss. So they might think, and that is something that can be recognized in our communities, because people will say, look, he's talking about here and there. It doesn't make sense. It's a bit gibberish. Or they say that he's talking something about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He keeps repeating himself. Yeah? And what happens there is that those parts of the brain that are affected that store your recent memories. And there is an analogy that we can use. So if you think of a bookshelf, so Molana's got a bookshelf behind him that we can sort of see. And if you think about your memories, so those books are your memories. And your older memories start from the bottom. So when you're a young child, you with your mother, your father, your siblings, those kind of memories you have. So start building those at the bottom of that bookshelf. What you did yesterday are at the top of the shelf. Now, if that bookshelf shakes, which books are going to fall? The top ones. So the memories of yesterday, last week, last month, whatever, last year, you're more likely to lose those than the longer ones. So people say, why does he talk about 30 years ago, 40 years ago? Why does he talk about his friends from school? And yet he doesn't recognize where he is now. Other people will have this.
Aklaq, on that point, like you said, because my mom suffered the stroke, she has had that. She's in that situation where what happens every day when we feed her breakfast or whatever, we talk about her brothers, her sisters. Do you understand? And then, she'll tell you, yeah, I've got two sisters, I've got one brother. She'll tell her the names. Then I'll ask her, who am I? And she won't know me.
Yeah.
And I'm experiencing what you're saying. And
or if you ask them the names of, say your children, so they may not recognize those. And sometimes things can be so bad. This is hakikat really of how people see things. Imagine an old chap who has dementia, but he has a young daughter-in-law in his house, or his daughter. he may think that that is his wife.
Yeah.
And if the family don't understand that he's got dementia, they would look at his behavior and say, look how what beghairat this guy is. He's talking to his daughter or his daughter-in-law like somebody might talk to their wife.
Yeah.
And there are other forms where people might lose their inhibition. So, for example, somebody decides to take their clothes off, but they're in the middle of the living room. Yeah, you've got guests out there. They might be swearing or taking the clothes off. It's important for the community, I think, to understand that. Well, a couple of things to kind of come back to that question. Really, is that dementia is something that is physical, affects the brain. It's not mental. It's not psychological. Depending on the type of dementia will be the retrospective kind of like the symptoms that they might show or the behaviors that they might have. If we don't get a diagnosis, we don't know they have dementia, then we can't deal with that. And the way to try and do that is to have a conversation with the GP. So if you start to see changes in your relative or yourself, then you need to start talking to a medic. The other things that are of our interest really is that amongst so we use BAME, Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities, we are more likely to get dementia earlier. And for most people, we tend to sort of say that dementia might start 20 years before we've even got to the stage where we realize that actually this is dementia. And just roughly on figures, that and these figures have been around for quite a while, so I'm sure they're not exactly accurate, but they won't be far off. Roughly in this country, there's about 850,000 people living with dementia, of which there's roughly about 20,000 people who are non-white British. But because of our elders coming here and their age profile, in the next 30 years, the expected growth is about 7 to 8-fold. So there might be 20,000 now, but by 2050, there might be 150,000 of us. So it's going to be important for us to look at how do our community understand dementia? How do we support people with dementia? How do we support carers in families? How do we support people that come to the masjid, for example? So Masjid Umar is having a new build. Within that new build, I was listening to a video the other day that there'll be community facilities. Well, how will those community facilities support somebody who might have been coming to the masjid for the last 30 years, all of a sudden has dementia, and the congregation, the community doesn't know how to deal with them? So there's lots of things for us to think about. And interestingly, there's one other thing, and mashallah, some of your alims sat there, is that I can't pull it off the top of my head, but I do use it in some training and things sometimes. There's a verse in the Quran that I do quote, and you might remember, so this takes me back, we were talking earlier about schools. When I was about 18, I used to read books of Ahmad Didat. And one of the things that I used to come across was that the Quran's for all time and it changes with time. There's a verse in the Quran that the kind of the meaning of which roughly is that that Allah gives life, and He takes some people to an old age, and some of those people, some of them forget after having known much. That's kind of the middle part of that verse. And if anybody's interested, I can find that verse. To me, what that says is, some of you will grow old, and after having known a lot, you've had knowledge, you've had skills, you'll forget. And that is very close to some of the symptoms of dementia. And so what I have to do with some of our Muslim kind of families is that say, look, if Allah is acknowledging dementia to us, then who are we to sort of have this stigma? We shy away from services. We don't want to reach out because we see what will our friends and family think, what will our neighbors think. This notion of izzat we sometimes have, that prevents us from providing good care. So we might say, that as a son, you have to provide the best care for your parent. Don't say, oh, but does that mean that we move and handle them without knowing how to do moving and handling? We don't know how to feed them, but we kind of force them to eat foods that might not be right. Some people may not be able to swallow, with their dementia. So it's important for us to recognize the types of dementia, to get the right sort of support. And inshallah, that would help carers within families as well, so it removes some of that stress.
Aklaq, I think our Mufti Sahib next door, here next to me, he might be suffering because he forgets every time 3:30 we're supposed to be on.
So,
I remember the ayat though, Molana, that brother mentioned. Sorry, brother, I missed the name. What's the brother's name?
Aklaq.
Aklaq, brother Aklaq, mashallah. And that is wallahu khalaqakum thumma yatawaffakum minkum man yuraddu ila ardhil umri likay la ya'lamu ba'da ilmin shay'an inna Allah alimun qadir. So that's what it's referring to, that you go back to a state where you don't remember, an age where you don't remember. No, I knew the time, Molana. I just got caught.
All right. Well, I just thought the title and you've forgotten. And
Yeah.
Was there
I'm
something-
getting worried about you. I get worried. I care about you.
You changed the title, Molana. This was one of those executive decisions you made without.
No.
consulting
See,
me.
when you're not here at the beginning of the program, this is what happens to you.
Does it? What happened? What was it? Was it? I'm sure it was on mental health. But anyway,
I
go
think
on.
Babar can see. Aklaq spent good 15-20 minutes explaining, and you did it. This
No,
is,
I caught that. But I'm just wondering about the title.
So
Babar was who made the executive decision?
Should we point to Babar?
our esteemed guest made the distinction between what mental health and dementia. And I think you touched on it just then, and I want to bring up
And
the
I
point
caught
where
it that it's a physical phenomenon rather than being some kind of psychological mental phenomenon. You see, I was listening more Sajid. I just give the impression that I'm not.
okay.
And I wanted to pick up on that point. So, as you alluded to there, that it's a physical change in the brain. Is there what leads to that? Is it something that just happens over time? Is it hereditary? Could it be like, I know Molana Sajid here is talking about his mother and there was a stroke involved. Is there like stuff that leads up to it that's common? Is it hereditary? What causes dementia? Do we know yet?
Yeah. So in terms of research, really, I was saying earlier on that I'm also a PhD student here at Bradford, and there are two types of dementia research happening. One is looking at cure aspects, so how do we cure dementia? And one is looking at care aspects. So somebody's living with dementia, or the carers, how do we support those? People may disagree, but I'm going to say what I'm going to say. And that is, I don't think anybody knows for definite what causes it. There might be lifestyle issues. So, give the example of vascular dementia, which happens because of stroke, but we know stroke happens because if we don't eat well, we don't exercise, we're unhealthy, that can lead to stroke. So there are some environmental kind of social issues, but then there are also questions on whether it is hereditary. So some things you are more likely to get if your parents have had it, your grandparents have had it, the types of dementia. But I think millions of pounds are being spent to try and answer some of those questions. So if they can work out what causes it, then you can, fill that gap or, plug that hole kind of thing. However, I'll give you a little example. Sometimes you might read in the paper and they'll have said, if you eat so-and-so, then it prevents dementia. One of the things that was often quoted was that if you eat turmeric, haldi, so it was in the papers and whatever, that if you have turmeric, it prevents dementia. And my question to that was that, so from Indonesia, Malaysia, Far East, South Asia, Middle East, we all put haldi in our cooking. So if that is true, then why do we have dementia in these communities? So the answer, I think, is that nobody really knows. But there's a strapline that is often used. What's good for the body is good for the brain. In other words, if you eat well, you exercise, you sleep well, these things are good for the brain as well. And if it's good for the brain, it keeps the brain healthy, it's less likely to go wrong. I don't know if that answers your question really, but
Alhamdulillah. So there was another point, and it might seem like I'm interrogating, and I apologize for that, but it's a topic.
We mentioned that Babar didn't speak today, but Babar is deciding to take over the show.
None of you can speak. I'm speaking mute.
Can I just say something though, just in terms of if anybody hears this, whether now or later, I don't want them to sort of think that it's about forgetfulness. But Molana, as you were just joking with Sab, so the saying goes that if you know you forget, that's not dementia. But if you don't know you forget, that might be dementia. Yeah. So if somebody doesn't know that they forget, okay, then there's something wrong there. But if I know that I've misplaced my keys, then it's not the fact that I've got dementia, I don't know where my keys are. I know that I've misplaced those. But it might be that I don't even know that I've left the gas on. I don't even know that I should have locked my car or locked my door or whatever.
Don't worry, like Mufti Saab's got quite a bit of issues, so we've got to deal with them after Eid.
Gee,
I actually thought today Molana Sajid was going to make a comeback after the disastrous comments he made yesterday which my wife raised as well. And I thought today was going to behave himself and you know, be of an impeccable behavior, but he's just not really dragged himself. He's just not really dragged himself out of that barrel that he threw himself in yesterday. Let's see how the day goes.
Mufti Sahib, no wonder there was a lot of salt in that salad yesterday we had for iftari.
I put that bit in for you.
So, Doctor, you were going to say something?
Well, I think I forgot what I was going to say as well.
Oh, mashallah. So let me come on to the point I was going to say, and inshallah, come back to you. So, brother, you mentioned there that the onset of dementia can be like many years before the actual you get the diagnosed with it. I kind of almost a little bit worried because quite often, and I think I hope most people, this happens where like you're mid sentence and then you're looking for a word and the word eludes you. So how can we detect that? How can we alleviate the worry that actually, this might be onset of dementia, or actually, this is just a perfectly normal thing. I just need more sleep, type of thing.
So again, I don't know whether this is right the way I'm going to say this, but with this lockdown and all this COVID-19 business, and you've had people that have said that, look, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If Allah wills, it's going to happen. And then on the other hand, we say, look, right down to haram. Even if haram is put down, then we have to accept that things are fact, and we try to manage with that fact. If you're going to spend your life worrying about dementia, and if it's going to happen anyway, then you'll have wasted those years just worrying. Yeah, I think this is what I would say. But should you get dementia, is it something that's easy to live with? No. Is it something that frightens people? Yes. Is it something that has a cure? No. Is it something that's going to be terminal? In other words, you're going to die with that? Yes. Okay. But if you try to live well, then the chances are reduced. But if you also look at, Khudana Khasta, if things are starting to go wrong, because it doesn't mean that, one day you get a diagnosis, the second day you're in a hospital bed, that there's a time space depending on what dementia you have. You can live well with dementia. There's lots of information about living well with dementia. So Masal right? Somebody, as an example, that comes to masjid to read his namaz as a regular, and his friends, colleagues, other namazis there, they start to notice a change. Or if they watch how he does wuzu and it gets confusing, he himself might not know that things are going wrong. His friends are starting to see things are not right. Okay. And what we would say then is to try and go get an assessment. So you go to the GP, ask for a memory assessment, and they will try and tease out whether you have dementia or not. The only sure way of knowing is, like when they do an autopsy, cut you up or whatever, if they were to take your brain out to have a look, that's probably the only sure way to know whether it was dementia. Right? But this thing about maybe 20 years idea is that it's a bit like maybe like a heart attack, that your heart is not going to go kaput just like that. Things are being building up over time. Okay? So if you're going to be unhealthy, then just like it might affect your liver, your heart, whatever, your brain will also be affected. So I think the answer to that is, rather than worrying about that you should try to live well. But if your family are aware of the fact that as you get older, that you may be more likely. So if you're up to about maybe age 65, there's about one in 20 people, between 65 and 80, the chance of getting dementia. By the time you hit 85, there's about 1 in 5 people. So if you have a granddad who's 85 and is behaving bizarre, then he's more likely to have dementia than if you have a 40-year-old that's, forgetting mid-sentence.
I just wanted to add to what Brother Aklaq has said. So some of the things that you mentioned, for example, when other people notice some sort of change in your behavior, for example, you gave the example of a person doing wudu and he may have just forgotten to wash one of his arms. That's not his routine. So he's usually picked up by those people around us, our friends and family. And again, rightly so, the GP is a good pot of call to go and see. What the GP will do was carry out an assessment, a cognitive or mental assessment, and see how well you perform on there, as well as other things such as blood test and plus or minus scans if necessary. So all of these things is essentially to rule out other factors. So blood tests is to rule out other factors. Look at your liver screen, you look at whether you've got an infection, you look at your kidneys, etc. To maybe these are the causes of why you're not feeling so well or you're not acting in the most appropriate manner. A person, when he's got an acute infection, can be quite easily confused, can forget things at the same time, can do things that is not is normative. It's happened to me in the past, and certainly those people who've experienced severe infections, they have done things which is not their normative things. So thereafter, once the GP has got a pretty decent idea of where they're going, they may request a CT or an MRI, and sometimes the CT or MRIs will give us an idea about how good. First of all, it's a scan of exclusion, whether the person has got maybe a tumor or hemorrhage or stroke, or to the extent they can even show loss of brain mass, which is characteristic of Alzheimer's as well. So these all put together with the detailed history can give a GP a decent idea of whether this person has got an onset of dementia, and then the person can be managed thereafter. And that's what I wanted to say earlier that came back to me. So yeah,
Oh, mashallah.
so yes, it's like Brother Aklaq said, what's good for your body is also good for your mind. So things like toxins that we may put in our bodies, those people who have amounts of alcohol, it's not good for your body. Those people who smoke or even any other illicit material that they have, it's not good for one's body. And so what's bad for the body is also going to be bad for the mind. Eating in excess, eating fast food in excess, that could, I don't know, I haven't seen any studies, but again, it could lead to other illnesses and diseases, but then that could trigger off something else. We have read for South Asian people, we're already predisposed to type 2 diabetes anyway. And there's many studies to suggest that, and you will see that within our communities as well. We'll have a lot of people with type 2 diabetes. Thereafter, those people who have type 2 diabetes, they are at a higher risk of having strokes. And Brother Aklaq mentioned strokes can obviously lead to a person having vascular dementia as well. And so these are things that we should look. And I think health in general, we're quite blasé about how we look after ourselves. We eat what we like. We haven't changed. And Molana Sajid and I were speaking about this yesterday as well. We've adopted our food traits from Pakistan and India, Bangladesh, from where we've come, but we haven't changed our lifestyle in terms of what we work. The food traits that we picked up from our ancestral countries were quite easily for the people who live and work there. We don't have that. A lot of us, certainly so for myself, we sit down a lot of the time during throughout our day's work. We're not active, we're not physically, it's not laborious our work. And so that may be a factor that we're not considering as well. We haven't changed our diet to meet the needs of our placing in this country. I think it's a multifactorial thing that we need to think about. We've touched upon dementia and care of the elderly. Elderly care, I think one thing I wanted to just say that as a kid, I saw on a regular occurrence where random kids or other kids in the street would carry shopping bags for an older person from the local corner shop or grocery store. I don't see that anymore. Maybe we've just become self-centered, or we just rely on ourselves. We only think about ourselves. I know there's many factors to that, but we don't see encouragement of our youth to say, look, if you see an older person, at least offer your assistance to them. But that can be counterintuitive if a person that's his only means to be independent. We're taking that independency off him. So there's a fine line between how much we do and we don't. It's just something that it came to my mind. I thought I'd just share that anecdotal story.
Thank you, Doctor. Mashallah. So there was a point which we were talking about in the previous podcast and the one before that, around when we were talking about social acceptance. And it's almost like when we're talking about dementia and we're talking about it within our community, like the words that come to mind are associated with it, and you made a really good point. There isn't a word in our languages that really encapsulate dementia. So the closest one that people start thinking is pagal, or the person's going crazy. So Mufti Sahab, and this was a question I'm going to pose to you, is what can we do around kind of taboos and struggle of acceptance of dementia in our societies, in our communities, to kind of get over that hurdle where people are automatically labeled, and it's almost like a derogatory label that we assign to people when we kind of start detecting dementia.
نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم. جزاكم خير Babar. We've talked last 3 sort of podcasts, possibly maybe even all the way right back to number 1, about what we use to define how we live our life. And we are more so looking at social izzat, as we refer to it, rather than true izzat, defining how we live our lives. So when it comes to caring for elderly, then we look at what is socially acceptable rather than what is the religious sort of grounding, or what is the religious instruction for it. So even if a person is literally drowning and needs help because it's way beyond their capabilities to look after someone, if at that time it's not socially acceptable to seek help, or even, and we touched upon this when we talked about nursing homes a day or 2 days ago, they feel that this is the wrong thing to do. But as soon as society swings the other way and says that, it's absolutely acceptable that as soon as a person reaches that age, like we put young children in nurseries when we go to work, then it's no different in putting an elderly person in a nursing home, in that you lack the time and lack the expertise that another organization can offer. So we've always got to, because we keep defining ourselves as Muslims and we keep using that identity regularly, and we believe and we portray that that's a cornerstone identity more than, say, our citizenship or more than our ethnicity or everything else. If that is the case, then really our religious kind of directives, our religious sources, our religious scriptures should be dictating more than how society perceives whether we're a good son or good daughter or not. In that regard, a lot of the things Brother Aklaq has said and the others have said, it's a case of being sensible. The Sharia does not burden someone beyond their capacity. So if a person can easily look after parents, then obviously it's their duty to do so. Why? Very similar to it. And I don't want to kind of play the selfish card that, if I look after my parents, then my kids can look after me as well. There is an element to that. But really, it's a case of, going the other way, that my parents did actually look after me. So, I should look after them. Not that, I'm expecting someone to come back and kind of carry me around. And that should be there. Obviously, we're speaking in a very idealistic way. Not all families can function in that way. We have, unfortunately, within our communities, a lot of dysfunctionality between parents and children. And unfortunately, and maybe that's another podcast, there's a lot of abuse that's reported in our houses, unfortunately. And a lot of this is because it's taboo, is kept under the carpet and not brought up, and it's not an issue. And it's unfortunately the ones who are the weak in our communities, the weak within our houses, the young woman who's come in, or the young children, or maybe the wife, or maybe the husband, depending if they've been attending Molana Sajid's and Babar's jiu-jitsu lessons, and therefore the poor chap is getting what for. So we don't. So society dictates these sorts of things. So it shouldn't do. It should be what's right. It should be case by case. We cannot give blanket statements. It's case by case. You look at what you can provide. It's not a topic that should be discussed. It should be discussed. It impacts on the whole house. It impacts on people living in that house. And there should be a mature, frank conversation and chat about it. We've talked about communication throughout all 5 podcasts today, and this one as well. And communication has to be there. So it's not something, better not mention that because it's, my husband's father, or better not mention that because it's my mother-in-law, and, this is the sort of thing that people are going to expect me to say about my mother-in-law. So, all these sorts of things, conversation should be having. There's got to be more maturity. There's got to be more functionality in our homes, rather than kind of just screaming and shouting as trying to solve problems. And these are issues. And these issues, if they're discussed, then we find the best possible route for that particular individual, irrespective of how it's going to be seen as your social izzat, your social status in the community. So I think that hopefully
most picky on that. I think it's very important that our elders in the home, they stay active, because obviously when they retire from their workplaces and whatever, then sometimes like we say, oh Buji, sit down, you don't do anything. And what then happens is they become lazy. And again, me or Dr. Waqas, Masha, we've been talking a lot last few days, and Masha, his dad, 58 years old, but he's active. He goes to work every single day, and he's happy that he's active. Because had he been home, he'll just be sat there, and that will just cause more problems. So
I think I want to bounce off you there, Molana, not literally, obviously. But I want to bounce off you.
You can do now. You're right next to me.
If you could bounce off you. Yes,
yeah, you can do now.
That's why I had to clarify what I was saying. That this was not a hakiki bounce, but this was a majazi bounce. That I'm going to just sort of bounce off you there.
If you push yourself this way again.
I get confused because the camera plays on my mind and I don't know which way to go.
Go opposite door, do you think?
That's right. It's even within our community, you know, our women get married, and then they do become very much housebound, and then by the time they're hitting their sort of 30s, then you know the excess weight is getting put on. They're not looking at ways to remove that excess weight or manage that excess weight, you know, and that's in so many ways. You know, consumption of food, and also obviously of burning off that consumption of food. You know, it's just a case of physics, really, mass. You know, if you take on X amount of mass, then you've got to be somehow burning off that X amount of mass. So we don't do that. And then, like you said, as we get older, our jobs change. You know, it's something, you know, I'm very young, as we have already been reiterating many times in these podcasts. But I realized as well. Sorry?
If you keep saying it, we might actually believe it.
That's what I'm doing. So
most time you colour the top part of your beard, then we believe you.
This part.
I will do. I'm working on it. You see, this part of the beard was matching my white jubba yesterday. Now this part of the beard is you see, if you keep one color, then you can only wear one jubba and it matches. With this, mashallah, I can have numerous outfits. No, but let me get back to what I was going to say. Is that, you know, I realize, because all my work is sitting down, so I teach sitting down, or maybe stand up a little bit, walk around a little bit. I, you know, podcasts, fatwa, you know, research, everything is seated. So I also realized, you know, in my you know, early 40s, youthful 40s, that I was putting weight on. And I've always been an exceptionally thin person. So for me, it was a bit of a strange kind of, a bit of a wake-up call as well. And I started to look at my diet. I started to look at, hold on, all my work, literally 12, 14 hours a day, is sat down. I've got to bring in 2-3 hours of doing something which is not sat down. So alhamdulillah, you know, I do a few hours every day now, you know, climbing scaffolding and climbing back down scaffolding and fixing roof slates and doing a bit of joinery and whatever. And it helps the madrasa, mashallah. I don't have to bring somebody in to pay him for it. And on top of that, I'm
glad you said madrasa, because people will think you're doing other people's.
I'm just randomly picking up someone's scaffolding. Yeah. So, you know, in that way, it's about making those kind of life choices. And as we're saying that, because dementia and care of, you know, the care of elderly, we are obviously aging, and you know, we've got to look at how our body is changing. And I know we're not speaking about mental states, but also this also impacts a person's mental state. Is, you know, if you're at home all the time, I think Brother Aklaq wants to come in. Jump in, Brother Aklaq.
I just want to sort of add to what you just sort of said, and that is really paramount. When you just sort of mentioned about, you know, the ladies in the house, because often the expectation is, and there's lots of research out about this as well, but the expectation on women to be the carers, okay? They may not have a voice. So, for example, if she feels her mother-in-law needs XYZ, she's got to possibly convince her father-in-law, she might have to convince her husband, she might have to convince her son. You know, those are the people that are going to be the decision makers. But who actually knows what's their actual need? The carer might not have the voice. So part of the research, because I'm looking at coping strategies, I'm looking at who has what voice, you know, what are the power dynamics in a family setup. Then the other thing that you've just touched on, which is why I think it's really important to raise here, that whilst dementia is physical, it's a physical change in the brain, but it's absolutely can be horrendous mentally for the carer. Because there's two things, and one of my supervisors, again, if somebody's interested, Sadia Parveen, she's done some research on this, is there's a difference between obligation, so we are expected to care, obligation to care, because my dad looked after his mum, so therefore I should look after him, as you sort of said. But willingness is something very different, that do I want to care? If my, I don't know, if my brother doesn't have to do any hands-on care, why should I have to do it? He's older than me. Yeah? I have to go to my work, come back, and then go to my dad's to help XYZ, whereas he can be at home, he just taxis, he comes home, but he doesn't have the responsibility. So what that does, it starts to build this burden, they call it, you know, burden of caring, really, that the carer will have their burnout. So forget building calories because they're not active, but then actually they might resort to things like comfort eating, you know, or they might not eat properly, or they might, you know, snap at their, you know, husband or their children. So if you've got, and this is very typical generalizing, if we've got a daughter-in-law in the family and she's angry about something, she's stressed, she can't cope with this caring. Everybody says, alhamdulillah, we're doing really well, but she's the carer. Who's she going to take it out on? Probably her children. What will the children do? They'll say, Mum doesn't love me. Or they go to school and they sort of say, Mum's a bit abusive, she slapped me. So you can see quite quickly how that family dynamic starts to deteriorate. All it would have taken was somebody to say to her, Beta, you tell me, what do we need? What do you need? How can we help you? Do you get the support? Can you manage? What can I do to, there's something like we call respite care, and I try and promote it to families as well. It might be a weekend, it might be a week. So services will say, if you can't, if you need a break, you can't cope all the time, then use residential places for, a day, a weekend. You want to go for, Hajj Umrah, you want to go to a wedding, you want to go on a holiday. Those services exist. And with a lot of our elders, often when I talk to them, I say, look, what use is this? That you have money in the bank, or you have a big koti back home, or in defense, or whatever it might be. And yet here you have a reliance. And honestly, this is truth, what I tell you, that I say you have a reliance, you sat there waiting for social services, because I used to work for social services, that they will give you, whether it might be a bathroom or an extension or whatever, and yet you've got money in the bank. You're not choosing to help yourself. So why should you have this expectation on society to help you? And on what we know from like research that we're looking at is that many carers are in a way forced to have to care without the support. So if somebody was to say to me, how's your mum doing? I'll say, alhamdulillah, she's really well. She looks clean, she gets fed, she's at home, she's happy, she gets to talk to who she wants. But if you were to ask my wife, she might say that, actually, do you know what? It's really difficult to get her to go to the toilet to clean her. It's really difficult to get her to have a wash. She doesn't want to get out of her bed. When I try and feed her, she doesn't want to eat. But when, husband, the son comes in, she says, she doesn't feed me. And these are sort of the real examples. And one thing I'd like to throw back, if I may, I know I said Baba is going to be the one to kind of challenge us, is that I would ask, particularly, three of you there, that what is the role of our masajid in terms of challenging these social taboos? So for example, if a Buzurg comes in to read his Jummah, sits at the front, saf, and his dementia behavior is such that everybody says, look, he's messing it all up. How does an imam deal with that if the imam has no awareness of dementia or doesn't know how we can support somebody? And it's only because how do we validate things? Our muftis and imams, they can add value to help change societal sort of norms and values in our thinking. Call it social construct. If I say, who am I? Oh yeah, he's going to say it because he works for the council or he works, the university. But we need to change this mindset. As you said, we empower the people who do the work in the families, they give them a voice, but we talk to our children and they can say, Dad, if I struggle, I will need to get some help. Is that going to be acceptable? What's my plans for end of life care whenever that happens?
Aklaq, on those points, one thing, my father passed away a few years ago, and when he had cancer and the end of times, and I was there and everything we had to go through. And even now with my mother, when she had a stroke, what you're saying, because now in Ramadan, we've stopped the carers coming in because of the threat of a virus being passed on. And so my wife, and the good thing is, alhamdulillah, I've got a brother next door, so his wife. So between my wife and his wife, they sort out, they have a routine and they look after my mom. Now, the reality, the first is my first, it's my brother's first, it's my sister first. My wife they're not the daughters. My sister is not the daughter. But the thing is, I always give them du'as, because the thing is, what they're doing is phenomenal. Do you understand? People can say, well, it's not my duty. Do you understand? I don't need to look after her. Do you understand? It's the children's duty, or that's the reality of it. So you've got to, and plus, once we went, I remember when my mom was in hospital and we had the social worker coming in, and they offered it. They said, look, into care, or she can go to a care home or whatever. And we said, no, never. We look after her. She's our mom. But then the social worker explained to us, look, not every house has the capacity or can take care of an ill patient that will need 24-hour care.
Yeah.
And So sometimes, until now, you know these things. Then you talk about respite. They said to look, if you need respite, every Saturday for a few hours we have somebody come in and they sit there so we can go out. We chose the Saturday so because it's a day off and whatever. So then you appreciate, wow, you know what? I wasn't aware of all these things. So sometimes, as an imam, like he said, we from the minbar, you got to look after your mom and this, that, the other, and you got to take. But the practicalities of all these things are not. Sometimes, like you said, you can't do, or people are not aware of. So now, because I'm gone through it and I've been through it with my father, I'm going through it with my mom. Now I can say to somebody, look, you have to be realistic. Can you accommodate your mom in your house? What changes are you going to bring? And whoever's going to look after them, there are funds available for carers and whatever else, and and that's their right. And so you can make people aware because you're going through that journey yourself. But had I not gone through that journey, I'll be like that ignorant imam, just shouting in the from top of the minbar. And so
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would never advocate for anybody to say put them in care. That's totally not what I'm saying.
no, yeah.
That if you struggle, there are services that can come into your house to help you, and we shouldn't say no, thanks, I'm all right. And I give the little example of the moving and handling. That people who are carers, like paid carers, they have training, how to look after people. Nobody teaches us, nobody tells us. So if we just say I'm all right, thank you, we might be doing a disservice to our parents. So whilst on the one hand we say Islam says, don't say oof to them, be kind and support them, look after them, care for them. But if we don't know how to do that, then it shouldn't be shame on me for asking somebody. Whoever we need to ask, we should ask. The problem we tend to see in society is that because we fear what everybody else will say, and Mufti touched on it earlier on, then we struggle at home, and rather than give them the best kind of care that we can, we end up actually doing a disservice whereby they like you said earlier on, that they become more of like a couch potato, that they're not doing anything, they've got no skills. If we said to them, for example, there's a grandma in the family, we say that let her get involved in cooking. Why? Because if she's even got dementia, she will remember some of her cooking skills from 30-40 years ago, and she will know how she feels, so she'll feel good. So when you said, Mulsab, that your mom may not remember who you are, but she may remember your facial features, and that might make her feel good. So she doesn't know who you are, but actually she knows that she likes you. She might not be able to articulate that to you, but her well-being, it might be that she perks up a bit more or whatever. This is what's good. So if I can kind of maybe just bring that to another line and then possibly take your stance on that.
I'm just going to come, Brother Aklaq, on the taboo topic, if I may. Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head in terms of scholarship. Scholarship and scholars are in a position, enviable position in some cases, and a regrettable position, situation in other times, in that they are considered as community leaders in most cases. However, sometimes touching upon difficult subjects is not everybody's cup of tea. So you will find sometimes some scholars, some imams will avoid these sorts of topics, and rather than touch these sorts of topics, prefer to touch what I would call cuddly topics, topics which ain't going to necessarily get anybody falling out with you, are going to get you on, everybody's going to say shabash, that was a fantastic bayan. So I do agree with you, as as scholars, we do need to step up a little bit more to the plate. Why? Because whenever the Prophet you'd see something which he did not like, he would immediately go to the minbar. Immediately. For example, when Aisha was going to free a slave girl, and the people who owned the slave girl said that we want to continue being the Mawla, he went immediately. Also, when he heard about Sayyidina Ali taking a second wife, so many scenarios that happen, the Prophet would immediately, at that point, go to the minbar, and the people around would gather, and he would speak about it. We have, as ulama, shied away from topics because they are taboo. And I think, moving forward, and that's why things like this podcast, what it does is, in a way, it allows us to touch upon those topics and, kind of prepare the community a little bit better. But I do think we need to be, more, forthright in tackling taboo topics. So I just wanted to sort of come back on there.
You
But
know,
most of our, and we should appreciate the privileges that we have in this country, the amount of facilities and care and that's on offer to us. Like we said,
Yeah.
sometimes we're reluctant to take it, but they're there for our benefit. And
Absolutely.
if we don't take it, then I really appreciate the amount of the people that ask and they're always chasing up things, and so you
And it's a
appreciate
shame,
that.
and it's a shame, isn't it, Mona, that Alhamdulillah, it's our country. We're not immigrants. It's our country, and it's a shame that we still, some of us still kind of speak in a way which is not right, towards this country, which has educated us and is providing services for us, which caring for our elderly.
No, then it
So
comes
yeah,
into that you're not serving your parents then, because if you really want to serve your parents, you look after their best interest, and whatever their best
That's right.
interest might not look nice, but the thing is, it's good for them. Do you understand?
That's right.
And that's khidmat. You understand? The
That's
khidmat now. My mom's situation situation has changed. So what's best for her during this moments? Do you understand? And I've got to look after her interests. Do you understand? And that's what khidmat is, to adapt as well according to these scenarios. And back we talk about elders. Elders are you've got to value them. My wife always say that there's is a John, there's a life there. Do you understand? How can we not feed her? How can we not give her water to drink? We drink ourselves. We drink, eat ourselves, and we've got to really value them. And
Brother, I want to pick up on a point which you mentioned as you were talking, and it was like, and you put it to the scholars on the panel, was like, so if somebody comes and he comes to the front row of the masjid and he starts doing actions, and you're just like, oh, he's spoiling stuff, he's not right. So in my mind, I was thinking like, what would I do in that situation? And I'll be frank, I don't know what the right action is to do. So what are some of the right actions you can do to start almost like so within the community you can get people who are taking objection, you can kind of sort them out. But in terms of the person who's experiencing this, because what you were saying earlier was like they're not gonna know what they're doing is incorrect, like the whole forgetting example you were saying. Like, so as far as them, like let's say that they're reading namaz and they're going to sajda before ruku, or they do a wrong action, and there's a commotion in the masjid about it. And if there's a scenario like that, what is the right action? Like, do I go up to him? Do I break his namaz? Do I sit him down? Do I talk to him? What's the right way to take that scenario? It
reminds me of something where quite a few years back, and actually this was in Masjid Umar, that I remember one Ramzan, I was sat there front row, and a Buzurg next to me was coughing his guts out. Honestly, cough, and khutbah was going on. So I forgot it was Ramzan, and I just turned around to him and says, Jaja, shall I get you some water? I swear to you, his coughing stopped. I got a lecture to say, do you think I'm not fasting? I'm this. I says, Meri Toba, if I ever say to anybody else, do you want water? You know what I mean? The issue here is, if we have ignorance, then either we will face something a bit like that, where you try to do good for somebody and you get slapped in the face, or for fear of offense, you don't say anything. And I think what happens usually in our communities is that everybody waits for somebody else to do something or say something, and then nobody does it. And what I find in our sort of, the white British kind of community, our mainstream secular kind of thinking, is that, alhamdulillah, in this country, there are all sorts of services, training, information, whether that's websites, whether that's, our own, brothers and sisters in all sorts of jobs, from, health, social care, voluntary sector, decision makers, teachers, whatever. What I think what we have here is, and if I just kind of try and keep that to dementia, is that if we're interested in knowing more about dementia, we have access to free training, free information, dementia-friendly communities, dementia action for organizations. We can make plans as to how to help things. So, for example, you go into a building and there's 5 doors there. You don't know what's behind that door. And what they might say, you might put a picture on the door. This might be a shower, this might be a toilet, this might be a kitchen. It helps to remind that person what's behind this door. Sometimes when I've said to somebody, tell me, how do you make a cup of tea? And this is easy. You boil water, and I says, no, you don't. First of all, you got to go pick the kettle up, but you got to know what the kettle looks like. Okay? If you're going to put, a tea bag into the mug, you got to go get the mug. You got to get the tea bag. You got to remember that you got to put that in and get sugar and whatever. So actually, stage by stage is quite complicated. Now there is some information rather than going in depth on that, but on all sorts of scenarios, and masjid can be one of them, and it might not be that I know exactly what you should do with that person, but if the congregation was aware of dementia, somebody behaves where they show those symptoms, the congregation is going to be much more forgiving. Yeah, they're going to sort of say, look, it's okay, it's fine, we seat them to the side. But if people don't know what's happening, then they're going to ostracize them. Look, if you're pagal, why are you coming to the mosque? They're going to say to you, son, why do you bring your dad here if he's doing this? So actually that stops that person from coming to the masjid. That masjid might have been the only consistent thing in his lifestyle, where he's constantly been coming. He knows the building, he knows what he's doing. But if we don't know how to deal with them, we don't know what to do. And the same will be true. Look, if they're at home and they forget, do we keep saying to them that, look, you asked me this 2 minutes ago, you asked me this 5 minutes ago, look, you keep asking me the same thing? Or like our teaching would tell us, in the same way a child might ask us, so each of us sat here, if our child says to us, Dad, can you tell me? Dad, can you tell me? We tend to sort of like have that love, that's my son, I'll keep telling them. But if our grandfather says that, we sort of think, do you know what? This Buddha is just, honestly, is doing my head in. He keeps saying the same thing again. So what have we got? We've got to find our coping strategies. What might a coping strategy be? To be loving, to be patient, to answer them. Okay. If somebody says that, look, I need to go to work. Yeah, he's adamant, he's got ready, he wants to go work, but he's an 80-year-old. Do we say to him, you don't work, and he's going to get confused? Or do we take him out? By the time he's come out of the door, he's forgot where he was going to go. You might take him around for a drive in the car, or you go for a walk. He feels much happier. You come back in. Okay? Somebody who, for example, says, you don't feed me, you don't feed me. I produced some, and they're on the website, some little like infographics, particularly for Ramzan. Somebody would ask me that, and actually this is really what my point was going to be. In this country, secular society asks us, how can we help you? What can we do? So even people like myself, we challenge right to the top, but also at frontline, that our services are not right for our community. But they say to us, what can we do? So producing infographics and say, look, as a family, if my elder, whoever they are, has got dementia, but they get up at Seri time because I get up at Seri time, rather than say to them, oh no, you don't have to fast, you involve them. If they, if it's a lady and she wants to help, cook iftari time because she always cooks, she's not fasting, but involve her. If somebody says I'm fasting, but during the day they need to eat, they've got dementia, they don't need to fast. Don't tell them you don't need to fast. Give them smaller meals. So the idea is, even from faith practices, like you're going to read your Tarawih, if they're going to join you, but they might face you the way, or they might, do the actions wrong. The fact that they will do those actions is going to give them satisfaction. We have to know that we don't need to challenge that. And there's lots of learning and training or whatever that can help support.
And brother, if you could send us them infographics and them documents that you were talking about there, I'll be sure to add them into the link of this podcast so people afterwards, or people can have access to them. I'd really appreciate that if you could.
No, that would be fantastic. I mean, my real purpose, I suppose, here is that people like myself, alhamdulillah, do lots of work in the community for the community, and we come from this community, particularly our India, Pakistan, Bangladesh kind of communities, is that our fear and our stigma, and the fear of prejudice that what will that Gora service do if I put somebody in that service or get service. So we don't make use of these services, whether it's research. Nobody wants to talk about the experiences, but you'd only change policy if we tell them our difficulties. Policies then come into practice. If it's about, a commissioner, and the commissioner says, oh, we want to do this, what do you think? We say, alhamdulillah, we're all right. We need to speak up, we need to be involved, we need to sort of give that challenge. So inshallah, we can provide care at home. Our masajid are our community centers. We can provide those services. People feel comfortable to go maybe talk to an alim rather than go talk to no offense, doctor, but we might say the doctor might see me 5 minutes, but the Molana might sit with me for half an hour. I don't need somebody to come and do sitting services if I've got somebody in masjid that talk to me. So we can build that kind of resilience, inshallah.
MashaAllah. I know Mufti Sahib, you've got something on after this and you need to go. Is there anything you want to summarize, anything you want to add to the end? Because we're an hour now.
No, I think, I guess it's more, much of a ditto on what we've already previously said over the podcast. There's, it's conversations. We need to be more functional in the way we operate, taking into consideration views of everybody in the family, and as a result, find what's in the best interest of that individual. Obviously, we try to keep active as long as possible. In more ways than one. We're not just speaking about, we are a creature with numerous needs, physical, mental, and spiritual, and we need to ensure that all are maintained healthily and find the right advice and support through various networks. They're the kind of brief words I want to leave, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Thank you. And Molana Sahib, is there anything you want to add?
No, mashallah, we've had inspiring words, and I think, like you said, keep those elders involved in your house and hack them sometimes when they say something, listen to them. I was going to say a story that Aklaq mentioned. An elder he was sat with his son and he's asking his son, what's that? And he said, bird. And he said, what's that? Bird. And the father asks about 20 times, and every time son goes, Dad, don't you understand? It's a bird. And then the dad said, when you were small, and yeah, it's that way around, is it? Yeah. Yeah. When you were young, you asked me many times. Yeah, you asked me the same question many times. Yeah, and I said the same thing, that this is a bird. And today, I've asked you a few times, and you can't hack what I'm saying. So we've got to tolerate them, patience, and these are big. They're assets in it that we've got to value and.
We surrender, Molana. We surrender.
You surrendered last night, Dory.
Let's not go there. Dr. Saab, finally, is there anything from you to add?
Alhamdulillah, the esteemed colleagues have mentioned quite a few topics, quite a few points, and they've talked at length. I think what to take from this is that, in general, it all does start from home for all of our things, whether it's nurturing the kids, whether it's looking after our own health and the health of our friends and family. We need to have a frank discussion about this topic. No one really talks about this topic, not just in this seminar, in our podcast. They don't talk about at home, where we have older people who are more vulnerable to this. So if we do start having early conversations, we're all, married over here. Some of us got children, some of us haven't. Some of us live with the same home, in the same home as our parents. We can have this conversation before. God forbid something that can come up with them. If we have this conversation, they'll be more prepared. If we read the literature around this, we'll be more prepared. And things like I think Brother Aklaq mentioned, is our home fit enough to look after our parents? Whether they have dementia or not, is it fit enough to have to look after our parents? Maybe we need to start thinking about having a ground floor toilet or bathroom anyway, just so that they don't need to walk up. An injury could afflict any one of us, whether we're young or old. And if we're climbing up and down stairs, it's going to be difficult. Maybe we can put a stair lift in for our older folk, or even downstairs toilet, whichever one's the easy one out of the two. Allowing them to obviously work in the kitchens if they feel like they want to, and continues. It's a fine line between giving respect and allowing them to have their independence. Not taking away all of their independence that we feel that this is out of respect, but then if they're quite happily and able to, then you've offered that as a son, our father, I'll make you a cup of tea, and it's our prerogative as children to help our parents, not our wives or our children, our own children. It's the sons and the daughters first. It's their right to look after their parents, and so you offer your father, look, I'll make you a cup of tea, and your father says, no, I'm okay, I'll make it myself. So you offered as a son out of the sincerity of your heart. Your father said, alhamdulillah, thank you very much, but I'll do it myself. I think that's grounds to say, chalo, he's okay for him to do himself, and if he needs me, I'm just around the corner, I'm in the other room, or I'm in the kitchen with him doing something else. So that can just perpetuate in terms of him being independent as much as he can. And things like speaking with the community, I think the masjid is a very good port of call where we have these things, and making something, making our masjids friendly for this, an environment friendly for those people who have these ailments. Well, I think some of the new mosques have put in disability access, but maybe we haven't thought about looking into it, whether it's dementia friendly and stuff like this. Certainly new builds it's quite easy to do, and older builds is probably more costly, but that's something that we can think of having quite frank discussions with the people who attend the mosque and say, look, we have this illness which is coming in our older generation who are attending the mosque. Let's talk about it. Let's make you guys aware. If you don't know, we can have seminar or having workshops and things. There's so many things we can do, and using the masjid as a base. And alhamdulillah, a lot of those were highlighted by our esteemed founders, both the scholars, Molana Sajid and Mufti Sahib, and Brother Aklaq is already research as well. I hope. And it's the take-home message, I think, is those people who are watching, whether they're young or old, everyone can be interactive within this thing. So everyone should take a part of this and say, look, chalo, this is not just my welfare, it's the welfare of my own family and the family around, and the community around me. So you can take an active role, and it doesn't really need to be as long as we do. And now it could be a 10-minute discussion. Asko, and I know Brother Aklaq at the beginning of thing, he said there isn't a word for dementia in Urdu. And to Wednesday, I actually went on Google Translate to find the word, and the dementia is spelled in dementia in Urdu script. And then I thought, let's try the other languages. So the closest I got to, because Arabic language is a lot more advanced than us, whenever they have, they use their own Arabic to develop a new word. So they've got, the closest I got was Arabic. I didn't even look into Bangla because I can't read the script, or Hindi because of Sanskrit. They've got, I think in Arabic, it's, if I go back to it, is Marzu Naqli. So that's how they describe dementia, just from a simple Google search. Maybe there's a better word for it, but that's what I found. Marzu Naqliyun. So and if you take the written meaning of that, they're saying it's an illness of the mind, of the brain. To a certain degree, yes and no. It's how we describe it. We can describe it as, is it a disease, or is it? I mean, this is going off further down the topic, is it disease or is it a syndrome? And I think we find dementia is more of a syndrome than a disease. You can't really pinpoint. The diseases are obviously Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, etc. Those are specific things. Okay, that's me waffling on. That's all I wanted to say.
Tia, Mufti Sahib, I'm going to let you go because I know you need to go. We're going to do some housekeeping. Jazakallah for joining.
Jazakallah khair, gentlemen. Tomorrow, inshallah. Okay,
inshallah.
Having us. Thank you.
Brother Aklaq, so there's a website you just sent, so it's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. You just want to tell us what that website is?
So, miriyade.co.uk, that's the website. And just to sort of say, Miriyade meaning my memories, because there was no word for dementia, we attached it to memories. But now that everybody sort of thinks dementia and memories, actually it's difficult to try and get people to understand there's other aspects of dementia. But essentially, this website will give you lots of information around, like finance issues, caring, living with dementia, those kind of things around dementia and faith. So if you go to miriyade.co.uk, there's information there, or /information/ that'll take you straight to the web page that's got lots of information on there, inshallah.
And I'll add that into the comments as well. So when people come back to this, it'll probably take a couple of hours to process on YouTube and the housekeeping to happen. But then once it appears and people rewatch it in the comment section, inshallah, that link will be there, so you can go to that. So a couple of housekeeping points for us. So I've just switched the banner, so it's got the account details of the masjid, and it's got the GoFundMe page. So GoFundMe page, last I checked, was just over £2,000. So alhamdulillah, keep coming in. So we're gonna go live today as well at 10 o'clock.
Every penny counts.
Every penny. Yeah, more than what we can imagine. Every penny counts. So we're gonna go live today. Mansab, do you want to say just some things on what we're doing tonight?
Yeah, inshallah, tonight we've got a special program because it's the 27th night, possibly the night of Laylatul Qadr as well. So what we should do is spend as much time in the ibadah, worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One act of worship can be multiplied by over 1,000 months. So that's over 83 years of worship. So what we're going to do is a special program from 10 o'clock till 12 o'clock at night. We're going to talk about the virtues of this night. Also, where we're going to have Adil Rashid, the famous cricket player for England and Yorkshire. He's going to join us. He's going to talk about his Ramadan, how he spent Ramadan, and possibly give us some tips on how to be a professional cricket player or something. And also just generally, we're just going to have a chit chat as well. And also we want to raise as much money as we can for our masjid. Alhamdulillah, I think 600,000 we need to reach. We've got £2,000, mashallah. So the thing is, we're nearly there, inshallah. So we just need to raise as much money as possible. So it will also be a fundraising event where please donate generously via the bank account or the GoFundMe page, or even I think inshallah we'll discuss later on other avenues that you can pay towards the masjid. Please support our masjid. Inshallah, our new build, we intend, mashallah, Dr. Sabs amongst the committee members, Baba's involved with the committee. All these things we want to put in our new masjid, all these facilities where it's a dementia-friendly masjid, also catering for disabled people, also catering need for our community. So that's the whole purpose, that it'll be a community hub for men, women, children, so everybody can really benefit. So we've got big visions for the masjid, but we need your help, we need your support. So please log in tonight, inshallah, from 10 o'clock at night till 12 o'clock. Then inshallah after that, please pray your tarawih, pray your nawafil, your Quran, engage in dhikr, but you still have 2-3 hours till steady time. So inshallah, please join us tonight. Inshallah, it'll be a good program. We'll have a couple of people on here, inshallah. So, Babar, yeah.
So, mashallah, we've gone to 1 hour 15, and the topic is such a topic. I almost feel if we had another few hours at least, we could come back to it. And it's so in depth. And alhamdulillah, I've learned so much just within this, just over 1 hour 15 minutes. So I thank brother for coming on and sharing that with us.
Thanks for having us.
Mashallah, and inshallah, there's a lot to take away, and maybe it's just open our eyes a little bit to the impact it can have in the community, impact on the person, and all the messages it seems to resonate. Really, the same messages seem to come up again and again and again and again, and it's communication, caring for others. So really early on in this podcast, we're talking, just pick up the phone, talk to someone, and the other topic which came out today was just the understanding, you know what I mean, and some of the examples he gave that Brother Aklaq about someone wants to get up and go to work and they haven't worked for the past 5 years, and just getting them in the car, driving them around, it'll be okay, and taking your time out. So some of them are really resonate deep within so humanity and stuff like that, and I thank you for giving them. Thank you for taking your time and joining us, and inshallah it'll benefit a lot of people.
Inshallah. Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.